Hi, I am Adi Ignatius, Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review, and welcome to HBR Quarantined. This is episode 2 of our show, which streams live on LinkedIn each Monday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time and is then available on HBR's LinkedIn page and on our YouTube channel. My co-host on the show is Josh Macht, who is my longtime friend and colleague who heads product and innovation at Harvard Business Publishing. We created this show to connect with the millions of you who are stuck at home. We try to tee up questions about work, about resilience, and about what's next in the world of business as we continue to confront the global COVID-19 pandemic. So this is week 8 in working from home for the two of us. We have a guest today who we'll go to in a second, Angela Duckworth, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania and author of the best-selling book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. But before we go to Angela, oh, and by the way, we're going to interview her. We're also going to give anyone who's watching a chance to ask questions as well. So put your questions in the comment box. We'll try to get to as many as possible. But Josh, before we do that, I want to ask you, week 8, how resilient are you feeling? To be honest, well, just to say, I've always viewed you as the only extrovert in our company, so I was particularly worried that you would be the first one to crack out there.
I don't know that I've cracked. I mean, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation for sure. Last week was feeling the slog. And then, of course, here in New England, at least, the weather started to change, Adi, and sort of amazing and a little scary. I saw on Instagram that someone said that Americans have grown bored with COVID, so it's over. And that kind of scared me. Going out, you really saw a lot of people. But that aside, there's definitely something about the weather that's helped. So I was feeling it last week. I don't know, where's your mood right now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my life is sort of a cycle of sleep and then waking. And I know that's sort of the normal cycle of life, but there's something that seems tyrannical in that rhythm right now, I guess, because it's just thing after thing after thing. I did play tennis the other day, and I wore a surgical glove on my left hand. All right. And it made me think of my uncle, who was a surgeon out in California and also a tennis player. And I'd always imagined him as a kid wearing his scrubs and his surgeon's gloves. So trying to do a little bit to not get so crazy.
The tennis helps. I played a little bit of tennis this weekend with my daughter, and that felt like a little almost normal, a little bit.
Well, and I had to say, the episode 1 I thought went well. Judging from the response of my family members and your family members, I think our fake TV show was actually a big hit.
I know. I think my family members, I don't know. I think they made all the positive comments for sure. But you know what, Adi, I have to ask you because they have asked me, and a lot of people have asked, what is the deal with the wallpaper behind you? The people
the wallpaper.
Know.
So, okay, the little story. Remember when everybody was buying toilet paper and paper towels? We were late, and the only thing that was available at that point was wallpaper. Mm-hmm. So we put it everywhere. It's on our walls. It's in our bathroom. 2 of our kids are wrapped up in it. The dog, of course. So no, the wallpaper. So I'm dining out on the fact that HBR interviewed Tory Burch recently, and I had the wallpaper in the background, and she stopped and said, "That's really good wallpaper."
Oh no!
Yeah.
Now you're insufferable. That's not.
I'm insufferable about my wallpaper.
Yeah, that's not. Okay.
All right. So we're going to be talking about resilience today and perseverance and grit. And so we're going to show you our weekly TikTok clip that will maybe get at the idea of the challenge of trying to stay resilient while working from home. Engineer Dave, roll that clip. So that is HBR has a TikTok page, has a TikTok account. That's our own Paige Cohen, who is trying to show how she's trying to make it through her week 8. So let's go to our special guest.
I had to look around and see when that dog yipping. I had to see if my dog. I had like post-traumatic. I was like, is that my dog? Thankfully, it wasn't. Though.
So week 8, you haven't eaten the dog. That's good. You haven't cracked.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I'm showing grit and determination.
All right, so let's bring in our guest. So as I said, our guest today is Angela Duckworth. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, author of the book Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. It's a hugely successful book. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies. She has a TED Talk that's been viewed 20 million times. So let's just jump right in. Angela, thank you for being here. And I guess my first question is, how are you holding up personally? And are you as gritty as you thought you were?
Thank you for having me. I'm holding up okay. You know, my lifestyle hasn't changed all that much, honestly. I mean, I'm used to rolling around in my pajamas / yoga wear / athleisure and kind of like reading all day, taking Zoom calls. That's me personally. Obviously, like the world is falling apart in pretty much every dimension. So that's not lost on me, but I can't say that I'm personally suffering as much as most people.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. But you know, I'm curious, Angela, because there's no question that I think a lot of people, well, there's just a slew of mental health issues that are obviously coming up for folks that we read about, and I think we all feel. I'm curious from your point of view, you know, the whole notion of perseverance, which is core to your ideas. How are you rethinking that in light of, you know, what we're living through right now?
It's a timely question. I don't know that the current crisis makes me rethink things in a fundamental way. I think the psychology of resilience and, you know, how the body and mind deal with adversity, you know, the principles that, you know, not only myself, but lots of scientists have been working on for years, I think they're playing out the way we think they would. So when you experience an adversity, a challenge that's threatening, so not a good thing, but a bad thing, that's new, that could do you harm, you know, you have a kind of a response, which is partly your body. You know, we all feel stressed. I mean, you can feel it, you know, your sleep is disrupted, you know, in the acute periods, it's like you can feel like sort of muscular tension, you know, your heart rate might be elevated. Yeah. Your mind gets focused on threats. I mean, you keep thinking about them. That's actually, I think, the thing to know, and maybe here's where psychological science can help. Like, this is not a bad response to adversity. It's part of resilience, is to actually have all of those reactions. I think what's important is, like, how do you manage them? In a way, how do you optimize them? And also, how do you make sure that you learn something in all of this? I think that's the other big lesson, is that, like, if you don't learn something in this crisis, then you weren't paying attention.
Yeah, for sure. It's exhausting too, having all those emotions.
It is exhausting, especially though, I think, if you have this secondary response, which is, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be having those emotions, or like, I don't want to feel these emotions. I think actually you double the work when you layer upon the stress response, like a meta response, which is that you're not supposed to have the stress response. You're supposed to have the stress. You are supposed to be stressed right now. If you're not stressed, you're not alive.
Okay, so I mean, your whole story is about resilience. I mean, your whole research is about resilience. I mean, this is a big moment. This isn't a sort of minor, you know, setback that a few of us are facing that we'll bounce back from. This is a kind of, you know, once every century sort of event. You know, you think of world wars, you think of depressions, you think of pandemics, things that shape entire generations. So I guess, you know, based on your research and your understanding of human nature and our ability to bounce back, how is COVID-19 likely to shape the generation that's coming of age now in terms of their expectations and their resilience?
You know, I just finished teaching a class for undergraduates called Grit Lab, which I launched this semester, not knowing, by the way, of course, that we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic in the middle of my class. But I said to my own students, you're living through history. And there is an opportunity here, if you think about the stories that you want to tell your grandchildren about the pandemic of 2020 and how you managed it. You know, you might tell a story that begins with, like, well, at first I was just totally sideswiped. I, you know, couldn't get my life together. Like, all my routines fell. I wasn't myself. I'm not proud of that. But here's what I'm really proud of, which is how I responded and how I learned and grew through these weeks. And I think that's actually what Viktor Frankl, who of course wrote Man's Search for Meaning, about his experience in concentration camps, said that, you know, this is one of the major ways that we achieve meaning in life, is our response to adversity. And that turns this narrative into an opportunity to demonstrate and to develop character.
That's interesting. So, Angela, I wonder if you want to talk about or have followed this woman who all of a sudden became a Twitter sensation because she basically went online and said, I've had enough I'm not going to be homeschooling or teaching my first grader these math worksheets. And all of a sudden it erupts. Now, so she quits. She essentially, which seems to be sort of saying not what you're saying. She said, I'm not doing it anymore. And the world applauds. Interesting coda is that she ends up later that day announcing that she has a Guggenheim for a book on resilience. But I'm just curious, what about that emotion of, wait, no more? How do you fit that into the narrative here?
When a working professional, in this case, a very accomplished scientist says like, no, I am not going to be spending 6 hours a day sitting next to my first grader on video calls in distance learning, you could say that's a failure of resilience. I don't think it is. And I think to understand why some things look like they're failures, but they're not, you have to understand the nature of goals. What a goal is nothing more and nothing less than a desired future state. Right. And these can be really specific, trivial goals. Like I have a goal of being on this, video conversation because it's important to me to communicate a little bit about my science. Okay. When I said that goal, like it's a goal to be on this video conversation. And then I said, because it's important to me to communicate about the psychology of resilience, that's a higher level goal. And human beings have goals that are nested in hierarchies. Like you can imagine visually a pyramid. And I don't know this scientist personally, but I imagine that there is a higher level goal that is more important than be on this video first grade class. Maybe the higher level goal is, make sure my kid develops into a great person. And when you understand that people have hierarchies of goals, then you can understand that when they disengage or quit on a goal, it may be because there's a higher level goal that is better served by some alternative means. So maybe she's like letting her kid do something else that's better with their time. And maybe she has even higher level goals, like keep my family and my sanity intact. And anyway, I could discern a little bit of that in what I saw from this narrative on Twitter. And I think when we understand that goals are hierarchical, it also gives us permission to disengage from goals that are not serving our higher level purpose.
Yeah, you can tell what you're saying. A little bit liberating, and it feels like that's what she tapped into.
I think so.
Everyone collectively wanted to say, enough with this. Let's focus on what really matters.
Exactly. And when you phrase like what really matters, you're implicitly talking about the higher level goals, right? Like, so I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, before I ask my next question, I want to remind the people who are viewing that you can raise your own questions about grit and perseverance and anything else in the comment box. And if you just joined us, we are here with Angela Duckworth, who is the Character Lab CEO and the author of the best-selling book Grit. So Angela, Josh and I went online and took your grit scale quiz. I scored a 3.3. Josh scored a 4.4.
Yes.
Is he 1.1 better than me?
Well, let me ask you a question, Adi. What were the items on the grit scale where you think that it kind of docked your score, that you didn't quite quote unquote do as grittily as Josh?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. So I took it right after that to see if it was easy to game, and I got a 5.0.
Yes.
So turned out yes. If you're for some reson want to game the grit scale,
please don't use this in HR. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, do not use this. Yes.
Well, you just want to beat me. Okay.
So I did actually technically beat Josh, and frankly, it was pretty gritty of me to go back and take it a second time.
It is. I commend you.
True.
I think it was. I think I was acknowledging that that maybe I'll sometimes change perspective. I think it was something like that docked me those points that Josh, who was lying probably when he took the test, didn't really admit to.
So I'll let you in on a little secret. It's not a secret, but it may not be well known. So I developed the grit scale in my first year, I think, of graduate school. And the questions on the grit scale that are about passion are, the product of a first year graduate student. So what I was really trying to get at was, having some consistent higher level goal or focus that gives meaning and purpose to everything else you do. So for example, okay, I'm a psychologist and I have experienced the entire pandemic as a psychologist. Everything to me, I'm interpreting, trying to understand like what people are really motivated by, how our attention might be biased, et cetera. And that is what I was trying to get at with the passion subscale. Not that aren't flexible in your thinking, but more that you have some kind of through line to what interests you, to what you're committed to. So now understanding that, Adi, if that was the spirit of the questions, which I may not have worded the best way. Do you feel like you have that kind of consistency of passion, that you love what you do, and that in a way you can see the world through this this lens that is somewhat consistent over time?
Yeah, well, when I find it, you can't take me off it. When I find something and I am devoted to it, you cannot take me off it. It just bothered me that there was some rating that Josh was 1.1.
Well,
better than
we don't have to spend forever on this, but I'll tell you. So Adi and I have been playing tennis forever, and I will. It's amazing. So, and we're pretty evenly matched, but we're competitive, as you can see, about everything, including the grit scale. And if he ever goes down by a game or two, this guy has like a crazy determination. Like I can't. It's just the will, and you feel it. So there's definitely.
I've coined a term for it. I call it grit.
Well, I think it is part of grit. Absolutely. By the way, we're talking about resilience. That's completely appropriate given the pandemic. But there is another half of grit, which is this passion piece, right? Like loving what you do is not the same thing as resilience. Being so captivated by it that you think about it after 5 and before 9 and on the weekends and the like. So that's not just resilience when I say grit. But let's talk about this response that you have. I actually think the phrase that comes to my mind is it's the "I'll show you" response. It's like when somebody tells you that you can't win, or that you shouldn't apply for this thing, or the odds are against you, or like you lose the match. Like it's this kind of like fiery, fist clenched kind of like "I'll show you" response that I remember reading Michelle Obama's autobiography, I guess her memoir recently, and she had the "I'll show you" response. And I was like, yeah, go girl. Like there's so many grit paragons for whom that is a visceral, reflexive response to being told you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got some questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to just go to some of those now. There are a bunch. So here's Katie from New York, who is asking Angela, how do you keep going when you feel like you have exhausted your resilience? How do you pick it up?
I think this question is related to the experience of burnout that honestly, I think most of us have experienced in some way, shape, or form, maybe not for an extended period of time, but the phrase burnout actually is, really illuminating as to what it is really, because the experience of burnout is this feeling like you have, given like 11 out of 10, if you will, like, and that you're getting back very little, but so you can't keep going. And it is characterized by a state of exhaustion, a sense of helplessness, and then also sometimes this feeling of like being what's called depersonalized, like not connected to the people that you usually feel connected to in your work in particular. And my suggestion is, first of all, burnout is a real thing. It's not a figment of your imagination. Like I said, most of us have experienced this. And then if you understand that the experience comes from some perception that you're giving it everything and you're getting back almost nothing, then you have to change either the numerator or the denominator there, right? Like you might actually have to work less. You might have to actually give less, or you might need to have some way to get back more. So I'll stop there because I know there are other questions, but I think burnout is real. I think that it's the understanding in your head that like you're giving everything, you're not getting back very much, and you got to change either how much you're giving or how much you're getting back.
Yeah, that's a real feeling of diminishing returns that I think a lot of people get to, and you're right, like taking the foot off the gas and just finding ways to shift into something else. I think that's really good advice.
And if life really is a marathon, which I think it is, and not a sprint, then like that's what the highest performers do. They're not grinding 24/7. Right. They don't overtrain.
Right.
So we have a question from Ramola in Johannesburg. The question is, how can I discuss resilience with my team virtually given the circumstances? But I want to expand that a little. You wrote an article, Angela, in 2018 for Harvard Business Review with Tom Lee on organizational grit. So maybe the question to take is, what's the secret to creating a culture in which an institution collectively has this sense of drive and perseverance?
When I wrote that article, with full disclosure, my cousin Tom, who made me write the article because he's my cousin.
Yes, we knew.
So he was like, "You're going to write this article, and I'm your cousin, so you're going to say yes." But it was a lot of fun, and it helped me articulate what I think is true, which is that if you look at a gritty individual, they have a very aerodynamic hierarchy of goals. Like what they do, during the day, these low-level goals, they kind of, match up really nicely with mid-level goals and an ultimate top level. Like I know what I'm doing. It's all part of kind of a, an aligned goal hierarchy where like, this is who I am. Now that's also true at the macro level. When you think of an organization, a great organization, whether it's a private sector company or a nonprofit or a government, they have a clarity about what their mission is. And this is why I think companies have mission statements. And then they have strategic plans that get you to that mission. And then they have like tactical objectives, like, KPIs, et cetera. And I think if you want to maintain or even build that kind of, clarity during a crisis like COVID. I know you've recently spoken to Tory Burch, and I remember having a conversation with her about grit a couple of years ago. And, I asked like, how often as a leader do you have to, remind people of like what the mission is and how the strategy lines up to the mission and how the KPIs line up to strategy? Just like every day, like every few hours. So I think maybe one of the big lessons is that in addition to being a great role model, and in addition to having that clarity in the first place, really appreciating that in a way, motivation for an organization is like a half-filled helium balloon. You got to keep batting it back up in the air. Don't be so naive as to think that like, well, you had the annual meeting or you even had like the weekly phone call. I think people need constant reminding of like how their part fits into the greater whole.
Right. Yeah.
Now here's a question. This is, I guess, a pushback a little bit. This is from Tina from Melville, New York, who asks, isn't it healthy not to be gritty all the time? That perhaps balance is the key to a healthy and wholesome life?
So I'm going to agree that balance is the key to a happy and wholesome life. I think I'm going to give you my response, but you're also probably going to roll your eyes. So my response is that, I don't think grit is grinding like all the time, right? Like I hope I'm gritty. I try to be gritty and I like grit. So what do I do? Like I slept late today. Like I went for a run yesterday, socially distanced with the mask on and all that. But I don't think that the word grit sounds like masochistic. But really all it is trying to be committed to things in the long run and to work toward them. But if it really is a long run, that means that there's got to be balance. There's got to be forgiveness. There's got to be self-compassion. There's got to be sleeping late occasionally. And I think that's the message. So the John Wayne kind of like true grit, like it's not about punishing yourself. It's maybe not the right sounding word.
But one thing, it also is about, as you say, having direction and purpose and knowing where you're going. I just find right now with so much uncertainty, and you've got to believe all have a lot of anxiety, or at least some low level of anxiety. How do you kind of create that direction and purpose when you're thinking, where does all this go?
Yeah, I'm going to, before I give you a solution, let me just say, like that feeling of like, whoa, like for so many people also, given the current economic situation, what they do for a living, like they literally can't do. Right. So, yesterday I was talking to a restaurateur in Philadelphia named Mark Vetri. He's on the board of my nonprofit. And, for somebody for whom like their top level goal is to like, help the world through food or like, like run the world's greatest restaurant, like you really want to stop and just say like, hey, that must be like really difficult. It's different for like professors or writers or journalists who can kind of pivot in a less, dramatic way and still be useful. So I want to just pause and say, like, I think it's really hard to have a top level goal and then not be able to work toward it in the way that you're used to. And then the next thing I'll say, after fully acknowledging how, challenging that is, especially for really gritty people, I think that if you ask the question like, okay, given the uncertainty, given that we don't know what the end date is for all this, if I really think about my top level goal, it's probably something very abstract. And that's generally true. So for my top level goal, habits use psychological science to help kids thrive. I had lots of random assignment studies that were supposed to launch this spring. None of them happened because kids are not in school, and schools have better things to do other than like mess with me and my logistics for research. So the question is like, okay, if that's my top level goal and my immediate, strategy is thwarted, then like, how creative can I be? And that's part of the reason why I'm doing, video conversations like this, and frankly, a lot with parents and teachers, because I'm trying to find alternative means. And honestly, some restaurateurs are doing similar things. Like they're trying to like help the world through food, and they can't do it through their in-person restaurant. So not only are they doing takeout, they're, cooking and feeding healthcare workers, or they're, doing videos on Facebook to like teach people how to cook. So I would say that having real clarity about the abstract mission statement for your life is empowering, because even in a time like this where 9 out of 10 doors are closed to you, there might be one that you didn't even think of before that enables you to keep working toward that mission.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go to another question that the audience has raised. This is from Alijan from London, and it's really it's going back to the topic of children. How do we make sure our kids develop grit? I mean, there's some kids who are born, just the moment they're born, it's clear who they are and what they want to do and what their passions are. And there are others who are late bloomers, or who are, hardworking and smart, but don't have that sort of passion thing to drive them that you talk about. So how do we help our kids find all of that?
Well, one thing I will just say about, kids and how they sometimes I used to joke with my husband, they had just hatch, and you're like, wow, who are you? And they do seem to come with like their own, set of goals and preferences, but it's not strictly true. Actually, if you look at the development of interests and ability, like it's a process, and nobody's really born like, wanting to be, even Kobe Bryant wasn't born, to play basketball. It evolved very quickly. So how, as a parent, do you support this process? I think there's two things I would say. First is that it's really important, I think, to be observant of what your kids are attracted to and to nurture those interests. And I think for those listeners who are privileged and able to like afford their kids of like lots of like, that's great. And it's certainly not true of most kids and most families. But yeah, if you notice, as I did, that my daughter, Lucy, when she was younger, she just was like weirdly reading cookbooks. And that's kind of weird, right? Like, why are you reading a cookbook when you're 8? And she'd have all these like YouTube videos like up on the iPad after I got it back, and they would be like, how to make like unicorn cupcakes, etc. As a parent, you observe that, and then you encourage it, and you create opportunities for them to get kind of go deeper. But the second thing I would just say is that, the whole experience of childhood is basically a trial and error, discovery and development of interest. So one thing I see privileged parents do too much is like kind of narrow the corridor. Like it's like, oh, you've played soccer for 3 years, and now like I've got the whole rest of your life mapped out, and it's all soccer. And really what kids need is the freedom to be able to detach from things. And you're like, oh, I don't want to bake anymore. I want to do soccer. It's like, I don't want to do soccer anymore. I'm going to try writing. And I think this experience of trial and error sampling should, help kids actually eventually specialize. But in science, we would call it sampling before specialization. And when you look developmentally at world-class performers, they tend to have sampled before they specialized.
So we're going to go into our weekly segment called Here Today or Here to Stay. And Angela, you can play along if you want to, but really just to talk about a phenomenon that has dominated our lives in these past couple of months. Is it just temporary? Is it going to stick around? So, all right, so Zoom connections. We're all on Zoom or WebEx or whatever platform, talking to friends, talking to family, talking remotely to the office. We have our nightly quarantini calls with our loved ones. So the question is that here to stay or not? I'm guessing maybe not. It's wonderful. It's also exhausting. It's particularly exhausting at the end of a long day. We've learned scientifically it is actually exhausting that when you're physically with people, you can sort of look away, and there are various sort of body language paradigms you can adopt. You are sort of required to look right at the camera to show that you're paying attention here. It is literally exhausting. So I have a feeling, as nice as this has been, as nice as it's been that we've had a way to connect during the quarantine, I think this is not here to stay. Josh?
So I think, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but I think at least what I'm finding is that it is nice to be connected to people in ways that I hadn't been in the past. So, you know, I get what you're saying. If I'm able to see, you know, and spend more time with my mother in person, maybe then you don't need as many Zoom calls or FaceTime. But I feel like wanting to keep those connections is going to be really, really important. And I think using that technology is actually going to stick around more than we might imagine right now.
Angela, here today or here to stay?
Yeah, tiebreaker.
I think it's here to stay, maybe more for work, and then I would imagine we're going to go back to wanting to actually like touch and hug and clink glasses with people socially. So I think the Zoom cocktail party is not going to last, but I think the Zoom conference meeting with your colleagues in Louisiana will stay.
Well, so you did a really good job of kind of agreeing with both of us, I think. And of course, but we can't live with that.
Oh, is this just a binary? Like this is you have to choose one or the other? Oh, it's that kind of thing. Then I'm going to say that it won't last forever.
Well. There you have it.
Well, he's not as gritty as I am, so I think it's obvious trying to make his ego feel better, and I think the audience will.
So, Angela Duckworth, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
This is episode 2 of HBR Quarantined. Josh, you want to take it out?
Sure. I want to say thank you so much to our guest and to Audie and to all the people who make this show possible. Scott LaPierre, our senior producer, Dave DeLilio, our broadcast director, Karen Player, and Rico Cribbs, our design, and Kelsey Grippenstraw, Emily Golison for audience engagement. Our co-producers, Andy Robinson, Ellie Honan, Dustin Brady, and of course, our great theme music from Holy Fang Studios and Oliver Ignatius. I also want to say, please come back next week. We're going to have Ariana Huffington on. We're going to have a wide-ranging conversation, probably a lot about sleep. I've seen somewhere someone said that if you are having a good night's sleep now, you're probably a sociopath. I don't know if that's exactly true. We'll probably ask her that. We're going to ask her about all those wacky dreams you're having too, or at least I want to push on that one. So really looking forward to it. Hope you enjoyed this show. Looking forward to seeing you all next week.
See you next week.
So now can she tell us who actually is grittier? It was obviously me.
Yeah, but I think she conceded that since you can game the test, it's really not, really doesn't say everything about the character of a person. Pretty clear about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was good though. I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah, she was amazing. It was really good.
She really was.
Yeah. We didn't get to talk as much with you, Dave, this week.
I know. I kind of missed my little, well, at least we're still on, so.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
You know, my wife is running up the stairs saying, you're still on. And
I know. It's just like everybody. Yes, we're still on.
This is our special behind the scenes coverage for people who cannot get enough of our fake TV show.
Like Ellie keeps on saying, still live, still live. Yes, Ellie. This is on purpose.
This is by design, actually. Yeah. We're that good.
This is our overtime if you have still questions.
Yeah, it actually happened last week. It was a mistake. I didn't end the broadcast, which is crazy. I never make mistakes. But I didn't end it. But we got a great response from people saying, "Oh, it's kind of nice to see the folks after the fact."
Yeah, well,
so we are purposely keeping this live. It's not a mistake, folks. So stop texting me. My phone is going crazy.
But I do urge people, if you're still on, send us your ideas for who we should have in the future. Send us your comments on, what you think about the show, what you think about our guests, and we will read all of your comments and take them to heart.
So then,
do we go off
now for real?
What? Yeah, I think we may actually have to say real goodbye.
Real goodbye, not the.
How about we do a real goodbye, and I'll do Oliver's music once.
Can we get Oliver's music?
Yeah.
So if you're wondering, Oliver Ignatius is my son, and he wrote the music, and he is a musician and engineer. So let's roll it one more time.
All right. So long, guys. See you next week.
See ya.
All right.
One.